The day I was ordained as a rabbi, I presented myself with a gift, a Garmin GPS for my car's dashboard. It was big technology at the time. The note I wrote to myself to go along with it said the following: so you'll always know where you're going. I get lost all the time, truly all the time. I have zero sense of direction. I actually have the opposite of a sense of direction. The way I think is right is inevitably wrong. And I am also extremely convincing to others, confident in my erroneous spatial awareness. Yes, it's a left here. On this street. Yes, left, good. It was actually a right. In doctor's offices, I leave an exam room and freeze, staring at the unnavigable landscape in front of me. I often stand much like a deer caught in headlights, eyes bewildered, sometimes shaking my head a bit, side to side, almost like, if I stand here long enough, perhaps a trail of breadcrumbs will appear. Inevitably, a kind nurse takes pity on me and shows me the way out. It's funny how comfortable I am with getting lost in the world, but how uncomfortable I am feeling lost in life. In her book, A Field Guide to Getting Lost, Rebecca Solnit reflects on the practice of leaving the door open for Elijah at the Pesach Seder. She writes, "Leave the door open for the unknown, the door into the dark. That's where the most important things come from, where you yourself came from, and where you will go." While most of us gave up the need for a closet light to protect us from nighttime imaginings many decades ago, I would venture to say that many of us are still afraid of the dark, afraid of the unknown. This darkness takes many shapes: unforeseen illnesses, financial insecurity, unexpected setbacks, the whims of the marketplace, the actions of others, shaky relationships, and the mortality that we all share. It is hard to face the darkness, and so we walk around with false senses of security, and there's nothing wrong with these. To live facing the darkness can be very overwhelming, and these touchstones help us. They take the form of well-curated calendars and schedules, mobile alerts and well-played plans, with routines and organizers. The truth is, though, the door is always open to Elijah, to bring us news of redemption, peace, or wholeness, and also to bring us tidings of change, of heartbreak, of loss. How do we learn to greet the darkness? I want to speak to you today about three themes. The first, the power in being lost. Second, embracing the unexpected. And third, charting uncertain courses. My hope is that with these reflections and within this safe, sacred, set-aside space, we can all find the courage to finish our work of tshuva and emerge into the world at the end of this Ne'ilah service feeling more grounded and purposeful. First, the power in being lost. Rebecca Solnit writes, "The question then is how to get lost. Never to get lost is not to live. Not to know how to get lost brings you to destruction. And somewhere in the terra incognita in between lies a life of discovery." There's an art of being home in the unknown, so that being in its midst isn't cause for pain or suffering. Yes, getting lost is living. All of us have stories of a wrong turn on a certain vacation that led us to the most wonderful cafe, ruin, inn, adventure. And all of us probably have stories of life, a period of unemployment that led to new opportunities, a relationship that ended only to bring newfound love, an unanticipated move or setback or success that led to something wonderful. Of course, not all deviations from life's paths are welcome. Some are inexplicably tragic, and trying to find the silver lining in them is cruel. And yet these course alterations also occur, welcome or not. There is an art to getting lost, to being at home in the unknown. I want to invite us all to spend some time with this idea now, as our Yom Kippur draws to a close, as we begin to think about the fullness of the year ahead. In what areas of your life are you lost right now? And is there a way to ground yourself in the disorientation? Second, embracing the unexpected. I have often reflected on what life must be like for my 2-year-old daughter. She is just beginning to have an awareness of sequence, to internalize messages like, you'll be starting a new school soon, or you're about to have 2 brothers. For the most part, Sella moves through the world not knowing what will come next. As far as she's concerned, when we get into the car on a given morning, we could just as likely be traveling to France as we could be going out to breakfast. The day's experiences are there to unfold before her. I think for most adults, this come what mayness is harder to capture. There are a lot more layers of knowledge, our bodies, emotions, and relations that can be peeled back in the making of our experiences. While we have some semblance of control over certain aspects of our days, the choices we make and the contours and the lived fabrics of our daily lives, the hard truth is this: our lives can and do turn unexpectedly. And even when we find power in our experiences of being lost and attempt to root ourselves within the loss of control, a received call can fill us with unwelcome news, an accident, someone else's decisions crashing into our choice points, or plain inconvenience. These are not typically welcome elements of our day. While the unexpected can, and sometimes is, filled with whimsy and great adventure, it often throws us for a giant loop. The Talmud includes this following story. Rabbi Yochanan issued the announcement, "Beware of the flies surrounding the person afflicted with ra'atan," which was some sort of skin disease or other infectious disease. Rabbi Ze'era never sat downwind of the sufferer. Rabbi Eliezer never entered their tent. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi never ate any eggs coming from the alley in which they lived. Rabbi Joshua ben Levi, however, hugged them and engaged in Torah with them. This is a radical Talmudic story. In it, the first 4 rabbis don't want to embrace the messiness, the unknown around them. It is undesirable. No one really knew what Ratan was, and the rabbis are afraid of it. And yet, these rabbis are so fixated on staying within their narrowly defined zones of safety, they fail to realize the real point of having a neighbor with Ra'atan. And that is that their neighbor needed them. God bless Rabbi Joshua ben Levi. He embraces his neighbors and studies Torah with them. Think of all that Rabbi Joshua had to transcend to take this action. He had to break through his own fears, his own sense of self-preservation, the societal norms around him, and a heavy dose of stigma. This is the difference between us and toddlers. It is true that sometimes life throws us a curveball, but all too often we may be so focused on avoiding potential setbacks that we fail to tap into our most core values of compassion, kindness, and curiosity, let alone a little bit of a calculated risk. While come what mayness may be an asset at some points in our lives, at other times it can lead us in spaces of inaction or apathy. The rabbis avoid their neighbors out of fear, an abundance of caution, and probably a healthy dose of ignorance. And so I ask us all today, who or what in your life are you avoiding? Maybe out of these same feelings that is calling for your attention. Part of embracing the unexpected is just that, embracing it. The unexpected can be something that happens to us, but unlike being lost, it is also something we can actively seek, something we can walk into, encourage, and nourish. The unexpected can be a welcome guest or an invited friend, just as much as it can be an uninvited visitor. The people I admire most in this world are connoisseurs of the unexpected. People who know just when to say yes to a new experience, who pride themselves on being in community with folks who need them, and who are attentive to the requirements of the world. They are also people who have been faced with life's worst and who have come out the other end, not because they asked for it or wanted it, but because life brought them what it did and they responded. When I close my eyes and imagine who I want to grow into, it's these kinds of people, the ones who seek out and embrace the unexpected in a bear hug, and the ones who respond to the darkness because that's all there's left to do. And so I ask again, who or what in your life are you avoiding that is calling out for your attention? What unexpected should you consider embracing? Third, charting uncertain courses. Included in the Talmud in a different part, but with a similar-ish theme to the first story I just told you, are three versions of another story. In this story, a rabbi gets sick and a friend visits him and helps to relieve him of his suffering. Here's my favorite version of the three. Rabbi Yochanan became ill. Rabbi Hanina came to see him. He said to him, "Is your suffering pleasing to you?" He said to him, "Neither it nor its reward." So Rabbi Hanina said to him, "Give me your hand." Rabbi Yochanan gave him his hand, and Rabbi Hanina lifted him up. Why? So that Rabbi Yochanan should lift himself up. It is said, the prisoner cannot free himself from prison. In this story, Rabbi Yochanan is sick, and when his friend Rabbi Hanina comes to see him, he gives him the opportunity for piety and high-roadedness. Hanina asks Yochanan, "Is your suffering pleasing to you?" In response, Rabbi Yochanan could have quoted some piece of text on equanimity or faith. Instead, he looks Hanina in the eye and says, "No, I don't want any of this." So Rabbi Hanina reaches out and lifts up Rabbi Yochanan. Hanina's presence, his touch, his strong arm helps Yochanan to lift himself up and move past his suffering. Rabbi Yochanan wasn't particularly at home in the unknown, and he was unapologetic about it. I don't blame him. I have watched people suffer greatly in illness and grief and tragedy. I have sat with many of you as you have done so in your own lives. The Talmud is giving us permission to be lost in those spaces. It even recognizes that no matter how grounded, how spiritual, or how intentional we are, life can get very hard, and we can sink very low. The story reminds us that there are resources to help us with the unexpected. Giving a hand and learning to accept a hand, knowing that we cannot always free ourselves, and getting to the roots and sources of the deeper parts of our lives. That's why we need Haninas in our lives. We need people to extend their hands and help us free ourselves, not with judgment and not with platitudes, but with presence and assurance and strength. We need Haninas as much as we need to be a Hanina or a Joshua to others. So who needs you? And whom do you need? And what can you do to further those relationships? We don't have to walk life's paths alone. We don't have to be alone in our darker times. That is what community is for. The Talmud is reminding us that is why we exist, for one another. The uncertain path forward is traversed much easier in relationship. I want to return to the original piece from a field guide to getting lost that I shared. Leave the door open for the unknown, the door into the dark. That's where the most important things come from, where you yourself came from, and where you will go. So far, we have explored what it means to leave the door open to the unknown, but we haven't yet explored the second point, that we all come from the unknown and will return to it. In the Consolations of Mortality, Andrew Spark explores different consolations that have been given throughout history to help us make sense of our own mortality. He asks, what would be better, to die or to be immortal? He ultimately concludes that the deal that we have is best. He writes, we die, ourselves move inexorably forward in time, while the moments of our lives unavoidably vanish into the past. What I take from Stark is this. In a sense, we are never lost. We come from the unknown and we will return to it. There is, I believe, an anchoring in this reality. We do continue to move forward in time, and our past experiences do move into our past. The real pleasure inherent in each of our lives is that they are finite, and that each moment is precious and ours to hold. We have the power to determine where we go next as we propel forward in time. Amidst life's twists and turns, we have the power to decide our purpose, our sense of meaning, our reactions, and the lessons we learn. I recently had lunch with a Temple Israel congregant who told me that after battling cancer, her entire outlook on life changed. She saw clearly that our world was broken, and she decided to take active steps to change it. Today, she is eager to volunteer, to take a leadership position, to be a change agent. With that illness clearly a deviation from her life's path, she made meaning and chartered a new course, and has re-anchored her life with a sense of service to others in our world. Effectively, she has made a choice that will chart the rest of her life with added meaning, even as she is unsure of what the future holds. That's what I'm talking about today. And so, as the hours of Yom Kippur draw to a close, I invite you to reflect once again. In what area of your life are you lost right now? And what power might you find in it? Whom or what in your life are you avoiding that is calling for your attention? Who needs you? And whom do you need? I think of Rabbi Yochanan lying alone in his bed, suffering, with no one to comfort him. And then I think of Rabbi Hanina walking into the room and the power of him lifting up his friend. I think of the sick woman in Rabbi Joshua's town sitting alone with her illness. And then I imagine the power of Rabbi Joshua just sitting with her, studying a little Torah. One is a story of finding a path back. The other is a story of walking into the unexpected. And I think finally of all of us, imperfect and real. We have choices to make about what comes next for us. There are life spaces and people who need us. There are courses still to chart. Let us be brave in our next steps, for we may come from the unknown and return to the unknown. But the in-between sure is magical.